Welcome to the Ultimate Farm Wife podcast. On this channel, we're going to be discussing all things marrying a farmer, moving to the land, and becoming integrated with a family farming operation. Whether you're moving to the farm for the first time or whether you're moving back into a family farming operation, we discuss the ins and the outs of all of it. So let's jump into today's episode. Hi, and welcome to The Farm. Today we're talking with Jacinda about You've Married a Farmer, Now What? And as we are currently running with Season 7, we are adding extra questions in about value adding to family farming businesses. Welcome, Jacinda.
Hi there, how are you?
Great. Thank you so much. I am so glad that we have finally been able to sit down for this chat. And so can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself, your family, and your station?
So my name's Jacinda Barry. We live just near Lightning Ridge in northwestern New South Wales. My husband Joe and I, we bought our property in 2012 after 3 years of back-to-back floods. So we couldn't actually get on the place for about 4 months because of floodwaters. And then by December 2012, we're like, I think we're going into drought. And that drought pretty much lasted then until 2020, which was pretty awful to say the least, and that's really downplaying it. Way back when, my career was in child protection and community services. Loved my job. I'm still so passionate about that industry as well, but you get to a point where you have to say enough is enough before you completely burn out. And I still love the organisation I work for. Mission Australia is such a wonderful organisation, and I was very fortunate this year actually to host their board members from Sydney out here, and it was just so refreshing and lovely to see. They're such a wonderful organisation, but I'll never go back. There is no chance of me ever going back. So I started the farm stay simply out of isolation. I was having kids. I lived on a farm where most of my neighbours, or all of my neighbours, were older than my parents. And to me at that time felt like a very closed community. But looking back now, it's just you're just getting to learn to know people. And those same neighbours are the ones that I'll still ring up and say, I think I need a cuppa. And they're like, no, bring wine. And so that's what we do. And it's easy. But back then, working in that industry was incredibly isolating. Like I couldn't attend any play groups or mums groups because essentially I would be socialising with my clients, which was a huge no-no. And it's just so important to have those boundaries in place to protect yourself and your family. So I started the farm stay to begin with as a way to meet people. When we bought the farm, quite simply, quite frankly, it was a dump. We bought the worst place in the best area. And all I saw was work in front of me. So we used to host visitors here in exchange for giving us a hand. And it just sort of went from there. We continued to get feedback going, oh, my goodness, this is the best. We love it here. It's so beautiful. And I'm just smiling and nodding going, oh, it's a dump. Oh, my God. And it's only been this year. So we've been here for just over 12 years, and it's really only been this year that I've seen the beauty and not seen it, but appreciated the beauty of it. So, yeah, we slowly, I guess, turned it into a farm stay, and we're now at the point where it is very much in place to protect the farm during adverse conditions, whether it's really crappy commodity prices like last year when the backside fell out of cattle, droughts, with a flood, no one will get here, so that sort of screws everything up. But it's definitely during times of drought that will really sort of put us in stead to protect our family farm. We've got 3 kids, 3 primary school age children that will need to go off to boarding school, and we just need that better security of income to move forward and secure ourselves for the future, essentially.
Yeah. Great plans for the future. Lots of work that you've completed over the last 12 months. So let's start by talking about how you and your husband first met and then your first introduction to when you actually did get on farm.
So I moved to Walgett in 2005 for work, and then very much that age group, the pub scene was back then was the only social scene, and that's how we got to know each other, and that's how we met. Yeah. I think it was actually a trivia night in Walgett that one of the police officers was hosting that we actually met. And so then we got married in 2010. We were just looking to buy a place. We're both off farms. Joe's parents own a place down the road from us here now, and my parents are over in Narrabri. And so we looked across over in Narrabri, we looked around here, and there was sort of nothing that was within our reach. Like, we were either looking at a little hobby block, which would be 25 acres, which is, we both recognise that that's not what we wanted, and not what we wanted for our family either, or big 20, 30,000 acre places out west, out this way, which is also what we didn't want. So when this place came up, we came out to have a look at it and went, yep, let's have a crack. And we did. The lady that we bought it off, she just about gave us, it was like going for a job interview, actually. She was like, and how many kids are you going to have? And then, I'd like to have 3 kids. Yep, And so that's how that all came about. She must have liked us and decided that we were suitable to buy the place. And so that's how we came about buying this place, and that's where we're at.
Beautiful. So you said that your first impressions when you actually got on place after the floodwaters subsided, and you thought, oh my gosh, this is a dump.
Absolutely. Like, and I'm not underestimating that. Like, our camp, what we call our campground now, was actually a dump. It was everything from great big piles of fencing to bottles to piles of corrugated iron and wrecked cars and I don't even know what else. So we had a dozer and we cleaned up a lot of that. But even now, probably 3 times a year minimum, we'll go through and do a bit of an emu bob parade and have a big pickup, because what we find on the sandhill, like, our campground is all sand. We're on a sandhill there. What we find is we get a bit of rain, we get a bit of wind, and then just more junk sifts to the top. So, like, I remember it was about a month or so ago, I'm having a walk around. Here's this just poxy old plate, and I'm like, oh, there, yep, that's just, and I had to sort of half dig it up, because I'm just like, oh, more junk. And so I'm always embarrassed or mortified about that if someone says, oh, look, there's a little bit of glass or a bottle on the ground over there. But I find, once I explain, just as I am to you, explain our story, and that's what our farm tours are about, explaining our story, talking about the how, what and why, people will just go, oh, yeah, like, you can always look back in history or has been times and go, yep, you've always got 20/20 vision, like, you'd never have done that again. And so that's what it is. But the reality is, if our farm was in the condition it is now, we wouldn't have been able to afford to buy in.
Yeah.
That is the black and white truth of the matter. It's it is what it is, and here we are. You get what you get and you don't get upset.
And I think that's so important to reflect on as well. Like, it was in our budget. It was what we were looking for, overall. So that's really good to hear as well. And how did you identify that, yep, you wanted to do the farm tours and you wanted to do the extra value add as well of the campground and the bell-bottom tents? When did you decide that? And then what was your steps in taking the farm from being the farm that you've moved to having those 3 value adds?
Don't ever follow me as a business advisor. Like, that would be the worst person you could possibly want. But I really started it. It was very much a resilience strategy. Very much. It's like, okay, well, I'm allowed this amount of caravans, campers here. Oh, that's only going to make me this amount of money. Oh, okay. So maybe I look at tours and I'm like, okay, yep, that's really good, but how do I spread this? And the glamping tents have absolutely been the way forward. I mean, it was quite funny in the early years. Joe would make friends with the caravan owners that were coming through here just to inspect them, because he'd like, I'd love a caravan. I'm like, not in your Nelly, mate. We are never getting a caravan. Never going to. So the glamping tents are very much set up for me. Like, they have to be comfy beds. They have to be good linen. They have to you have to step inside and go, holy crap, I wasn't expecting this.
Yeah.
And which is what I do. And so when visitors come to glamp with us, I almost introduce our glamping tents as part of our family.
Yeah.
And I walk in, I'm like, okay, guys, so there's your tea and coffee and sugar and milk and your kettle and your burner, and this is this. And you can just see them going, oh, my goodness, how cool is this? And that's what I love to do. Like, I really do seem to make them as excited as me. And if they're not as excited, I'm just like, oh, well, too bad you are now. So that's, that's very much my thing. I love people to go, oh, wow, I was not expecting that. And two of our glamping tents are completely off grid. And I'm like, and here's your phone charger and here's your Bluetooth speaker. And they're like, holy hell, I wasn't expecting that. I'm like, I know you weren't, but here you go. And yeah, which is wonderful.
It's amazing. I will pop pictures of the tents and the campground in our social media feed for the week of this episode that it goes live as well. So for those who want to check everything out, it'll all be linked in the comment section as well as the social medias for the week of this episode. So then, Jacinda, when you first moved to the farm and you were having your kids and you were saying, you know, it was a little bit hard to meet your community because they were the families that you were working with, but also they were much older than you. How did you, it sounds like you've got a great community around you now and you know everybody. So did you take little baby steps to meet everyone? How did you get that supportive community that you have around you now?
Look, it absolutely was baby steps, but it's also time, which when you're having babies, like you want that support right then and there. And you can't just walk into a relationship as in a friendship and pretend you've known someone for 10 years, can you? So relationships do take time. And so if I guess I was 10 years younger now and had already been on the farm for 12 years, to be a completely different kettle of fish, completely different. But it was just time and consistent follow-up. Like I was always involved in I have and continue to be highly involved in our local CWA. It is the best. Involved in our local community with sports. I'm also our president of our local ICPA, a very underactive group, I must say. But again, that's getting more like-minded people around you, and the more you surround yourself with people that are like-minded, the better off you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You said, Jacinda, there was, 2020 vision, and you probably wouldn't do some of the steps that you've taken or the way that you've gone about being on farm. And we've spoken predominantly about the value adding of the farm tours and the campgrounds. Was there other areas with the farm itself where there was skills that you had to learn or something else that you would think, I would do that differently if I could pass advice on to someone else?
Probably my bookkeeping skills. They're very good, and no, they're not. They're not very good at all. They're pretty good. They go okay. Let's go with that. Probably outsourcing, but at the same time, when you are really living day to day during that drought, when the whole region, and it's not just here, the whole region was a moonscape. It really was just death all around. Like every day was a dust storm. Every day, the only green blade of grass was my lawn, and I was very pedantic. I am very pedantic about that. You're in survival mode.
Yeah.
You are absolutely in survival mode, and when you are, you're reactive, not proactive. And there's lots of business decisions that were made under those reactions. So purchases that we'd made back then that we probably thought we may have needed, but we were very much acting in a reactive mode, not sort of thinking clearly, because we just simply weren't.
I'd like to take a short break in today's episode to give a special shout out to our episode sponsor, Southern Cross Small Arms, and their incredible Taipan X. The Taipan X redefines excellence in the hunting world and extended rifle range, merging the swift action of a hunting rifle with the precision needed for vermin control. It's truly the pinnacle of the renowned Taipan series evolution. For our ultimate farm wife community and absolutely fabulous listeners, the Taipan X is a practical choice, offering versatility and reliability in a range of agricultural settings that we'll be using on our farms. For more details, check out our corresponding social media tiles or email me. Thank you, Southern Cross Small Arms and their Taipan X, for coming on as this episode's sponsor. Now let's get back into today's episode.
Yeah. So let's deep dive a little bit more into that drought, because we had 5 years here as well of that drought. And I just find when we're in that state and then we get to look back on it, we're now 5 years out of that. So in for 5 years, out for 5 years, what are your reflections and takeaways on what you would do differently?
Do you know what, though? I don't think we're over it. Like for example, and not necessarily the season, but those feelings and those reactions. So, for example, we had, it was for here, 2016, we had a crazy year where we got a cracking crop, and then we're going through harvest and we could go 24/7 because there was no dew, there was no moisture in the air. That's because we're all back in drought. But we're all at the same time going, surely it can't be as bad as 13, 14, 15. And then bloody hell, 17, 18, 19 was just, it became worse, didn't it? So 2020 was when we started to get some rain here, but it was still a dry year. 2021 was the mouse plague, was a much better year. And then 22 was a lovely year. But then 2023 here, the taps turned off again. And the cattle prices, we bought Angus cows and calves that we paid $3,500 for. Next minute, the cows are worth barely $800.
Yeah.
So we just seemed to have a run of natural disaster. Let's call the mouse plague a disaster, where it just, nothing seemed to click. And when last year turned dry, and all we heard was about, you need to prepare, there's going to be an El Nino, you need to prepare. And we're like, how the bloody hell do we prepare when the backside's fallen out of cattle? So that was incredibly difficult, and grateful at the same time that all of the effort I had put into my farm stay in the years prior to that in regards to marketing and social media and my networks, that was starting to pay off, that people were coming. And so thankfully, with the farm stay last year and again this year, is paying for last year's bills. We're looking at having a nicer sort of harvest this year. We're having the cattle prices have absolutely jumped. So we're not sort of in that fight and flight mode, but I don't feel like I've recovered from it, to be totally honest. It's still there simmering, and like I've been in contact with our Rural Adversity Mental Health Coordinator, Letitia Cross, and when I've been talking to her about that sort of stuff, and she's just nodding, going, yep, there is so many, and this was earlier this year, whenever it was, so many people in that same boat, because we just, out here, some of us simply just haven't had a break. And I'm not crying poor me by any stretch of the imagination. Life is absolutely what you make it. But those feelings of drought and the hopelessness and helplessness that we felt back then are very much just under the surface. And I still find myself making decisions based on that. Getting better, far better at it, but definitely still there. Certainly a long way from recovered from it, that's for sure.
Yeah. I love hearing that the value add that you've done to your farm with the farm tours and the farm stay really do sound like they have increased that drought resilience, the natural disaster resilience. And I really like that, you were talking about it's the time and the dollars that have been invested over the long run into it. I think that's not something to gloss over as well. For those who are new to the Ultimate Farm Wife, who are new to marrying farmers and being on the land, that is something that is so important that Jacinda has touched on. You need to think small steps and invest in yourself and your farm and your business strategy in what is going to carry you forward in the hard times, like we've talked about with the drought, like we've talked about with the mouse plague. And all of that adds up. All of that adds to that resilience for that. And if you don't have the experience to have hindsight on it, like Jacinda and I do, as we're reflecting right now on that, then asking those who have been there before. As Jacinda said, it's like her neighbours are her parents' ages. They're the older generation, and they are an absolute wealth of knowledge. The neighbours in my area of the same age, the same demographic, they've been there, they've done that. Reach out to them as well for that support, for those little 1%ers, because they've been there before.
Yeah. Oh, and that is so true. Like, I remember having a party at one of the neighbours. I think it might have been a Christmas party last year, and I had a bit of a rant, and one of my neighbours goes, "Sense of humour, girl. Sense of humour is what we need, and that's what we need to hold on to." And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Yep, you are. And that was, and I know she would have had no clue the impact that had on me, but it was very profound. Yeah.
Yep. The little pieces that someone says or does, how that just adds up in the long run. So, Jacinda, was there any advice that was given to you either before you moved to the farm, or pieces of information like that have that sense of humour that has happened since being on farm that, again, drive the resilience, drive your passion, drive what you do on a day-to-day basis?
You know what? No. And I think my drive and resilience has very much come from my upbringing. My grandparents had a very strong part to play in my life and my upbringing, and my grandfather in particular was the sort of bloke that just everybody loved, and he was such a hardworking, kind, gentle man, and a wicked sense of humour. And that, I think that his impact and him in my life has absolutely, I see things repeating just from his impact in my life. Sorry, that didn't come across very well, but in my head I know what I want to say.
Was there specific things that he would do or say that you reflect on where you're like, yes, that sentiment or that action meant the world to me, and that's what I do. That's where I get my strength from.
Style more than anything. Yeah, like I can see like the way my kids behave, and I'll reflect and say, if my grandfather was here now, he'd be like, oh, they're a bugger of a kid, and he'd laugh, and it was all in jest and it was all laughter, and then he'd be the one that'd be leading the charge on whatever no good nonsense they were up to next. And yeah, that was very much, don't tell grandma, let's go and do this. Or my grandma was always putting him on a diet of some sort, and so whenever we have hot dogs at our place, I'm like, yeah, grandpa will be sneaking these hot dogs into him. Or we'll go to the servo to get an icy pole of an afternoon, and he'd be up for a bubblo bill. That was his thing, or a lover heart or something like that. So I think those impacts, whilst they weren't necessarily farm related, keeps things in jest and lighthearted when it can be quite crap.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Jacinda, that probably comes to the official end of my questions for today. But for someone who is moving to the farm for the first time, what piece of advice would you give them?
Not to take yourself too seriously, very much so, and baby steps. That which is the opposite of what I do, essentially. Like, I'm all in or all out, and baby steps, I can say baby steps, and I've never taken a baby step in my life. I can look back and go, yes, that's why we had to be forced to take baby steps. But patience is not in my DNA. It's something that's been forced upon me just because of lack of funds, essentially. And I guess too, like, people say keep your circle small, but I completely disagree with that, because if I had had that mindset of keep your circle small and be very careful of people who to trust, be careful of people who to trust, I wouldn't have the networks, the connections, the friendships that I have now without that. Yeah. Between the farming and the tourism side of things, I know people from all over the world that have given me either business advice or friendship or relationship advice that I class them as a friend. And it's been wonderful.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with that. And I'm so glad that that's a place that you're coming from and where you've learnt along the way as well. Make the connections, invest time into other people.
Yeah. For sure.
Absolutely. Jacinda, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I know that the community will get lots of gems from our chat, from your experience. And for those who are following along with us, make sure that you like, subscribe, and share this interview with someone who you know needs to hear this or is wanting to set up a value add to their farming business, especially if it is a campsite or glamping experience with farm tours. Before we wrap up today's episode, I want to give a big thank you to our sponsor, Southern Cross Small Arms, and their exceptional Taipan X. This rifle is a game changer for pest control and wildlife management, offering precision and versatility that makes it suitable for both female and male listeners. If you're interested in learning more about the Type NX, head over to our social media tiles dedicated to it or visit the Southern Cross Small Arms website. Thank you very much, Southern Cross Small Arms, for your support. And again, thank you everybody for listening to another episode. We'll see you next time.